Hey everyone, it's a dose of Dr. Drew.
And here we are. Yes. I like the way you guys rushed to be first. Well done. And Susan, which camera am I looking at here? That one. Okay, good. Thank you, King's Chick. We're happy to be back. Saka Souffle, Betty. Yes, indeed. Hashtag that. And we'll give you guys, Donovan in Tennessee, we'll give you guys a chance to hop in here. Yeah, we've been away the last couple of days. We were just taking a break. And one of the reasons we were taking a break was there's been no update on much of the data. And interestingly, literally 2 minutes ago, the University of Washington updated their graph. So I'll go over that for you in just a minute. Give you a chance to come in first. We're going to have Dr. Lisa Strohman in here in just a second. You can go to drlisastrohman.com to see her stuff. Also, dcakids.org, the Digital Citizen Academy. Dr. Strohman is not just a psychologist, she's also an attorney. And she will have some interesting insights for us on what we can do from a mental health standpoint, which is what we're going to have to focus on next. Hi, Jason in Fort Lauderdale. That's Ozzy. It's a good question about jujitsu. I don't know how we do that kind of close contact stuff without everyone's immunity being documented and or a vaccine available. So that's difficult. Does the sense of smell and taste come back? Yes, it tends to. There have been some prolonged courses, but my understanding is it pretty much always comes back. Johanna, I'm sorry to hear about your cousin. It's a rough illness. It is a rough illness. Thank you, Lojo. So we're all gathering back here, and I will start to review what we got here. So the University of Washington, Dr. Murray's organization, just literally seconds ago updated their website. What's interesting is they are giving us, in addition to the graphs of the estimated bed utilization, ICU utilization, deaths per day, and total deaths, they are also recommending when we can pull out of quarantine on a state-by-state basis. So, for instance, in California, he's recommending that containment strategy be continued till May 18th, at which point those things can be relaxed. That's based on his data. Our death per day in California bumped up a little bit. Our hospital bed use went up a little bit, but it looks to me like our ICU utilization went down, which is consistent with what's going on right now, which is it's continuing to spread and numbers are getting a little higher and some people are ending up in the hospital, but we're getting very much better at treating this thing. And so ICU utilization is going down. The death rate is a lag, right? The death per day and the death total, up to 2-week lag on that one. So that may be why we're not seeing any improvement there yet. In the U.S. as a whole, we have a peak in resource back on April 14th, and it's starting a reasonably steep decline. We are meeting our needs, theoretically. And the total deaths are projected to be about 60,000. The deaths per day, again, are modified in a pretty broad range. They're about 2,000 per day now. Again, based on the U.S., they're not making a current recommendation for the entire country. They're sort of making the recommendations state by state. And if any of you guys on Restream, Ohio is May 1st. Let me look at that. Let's look at specific states other than California. In Ohio, he is recommending, the University of Washington, May 18th. May 18th. So it says relaxing social distancing may be possible with containment strategies that include testing, contact tracing, isolation, limit gathering size. I want to find a state that has like very limited, like New Hampshire is at very low numbers. They're saying May 11th in New Hampshire. I noticed Tennessee was in pretty good shape too, so let's look at Tennessee. May 25th, because Tennessee has a very erratic daily death rate and a low slope. Why would they say May 25th on that? It looks from sometimes his website is off a little bit. Judging by the actual graphs, Tennessee should be essentially done by the first week in May. So I don't know why they're saying relax on May 25th. That's a strange one. Let me go back to the Restream.
Somebody said, let's talk Stanford study.
I do want to talk the Stanford study. A new study has come out, and it will said, based on this data, they studied 3,000 people in the county of Santa Clara. They found that 2 to 4% of people tested were positive for antibodies. That they were anticipating 1,000 people, and they are estimating somewhere between 50 and 80,000 people are actually previously infected. There's a county of 2 million with up to 80,000 infected. So we were off by at least a factor of 50, maybe a factor of 80, in terms of estimating how many people were infected in California. Now, California is a little bit of a special case because we had direct contact with Wuhan with flights coming in and out every day, both San Francisco and Los Angeles. So it would not be surprising to see at least regions of high degree of previous infection. It also, all those previous infections will drive down the death rate, which is nice to see. So Oregon is thinking about opening right now. But again, thinking about it and doing it can be two different things. Everyone should be thinking about it, right? But when you actually do so is the challenging question. Gosh darn it. I can't get Oregon to open up for me. Let me try one more time. There we go. Come on.
What's the website you're on again?
I am on the covid19.healthdata.org. And according to the recommendations here, they're saying May 25th because you have kind of a low sloping, prolonged kind of course here. But it looks still really pretty good, I got to tell you. All right. Hi from Texas. Party in May, somebody's saying. Long Beach, I don't know specific data, but I know that LA County is coming out with some data on Monday, so watch for that. And I have signed up with Governor Cuomo's group to go to New York to serve in the front lines there to the extent that they need physicians in the ICUs. And turns out I have all the training and experiences to do the things that they need there. So I am on notice, waiting for them to give me a call. What is the difference between remdesivir and Plaquenil? Plaquenil is a anti-malarial medication. It has anti-inflammatory and antiviral properties. It's called chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine. Remdesivir is a specific antiviral drug that was developed. It's an intravenous drug, was developed for for Ebola. And it is actually showing really good effect. There's some data coming out on that. Histrionic, I don't know what the demand is, but I know when I spoke to the governor's office a couple of days ago, I guess yesterday, and they were telling me that they have significant needs. So I said, you can count on me. Whatever they need, we'll see. All right, let us welcome my guest in, Dr. Lisa Strohman. As I told you, Dr. Lisa Strohman is the brains behind Digital Citizen Academy, dcakids.org. All things digital safety is Dr. Strohman, amongst other things. Lisa, welcome to the program. Uh-oh.
Thank you.
There
Happy
you are.
to be here.
There's always a little pause.
Yeah, a little pause.
Do you hear me? There you go.
Bad, though.
We got you. We got you. So you rang in on my Fox 11 show last night and said, why aren't we talking about mental health in the aftermath of this thing? And I said, that's definitely something we need to be talking about.
That was actually her daughter.
It was your daughter that urged the communication?
Yeah, but we were watching it together, and so she says, write a question. And I said, you write a question. So, yeah, she was, of course, she sees me on this end dealing on a day-to-day basis with calls and I'm doing similar things, but mine's all related to what is the psychology behind this? How are people managing it? I have, patients that are being tested positive, maybe asymptomatic, and literally are coming to me and saying they're either being ostracized or treated like they're wearing a scarlet A.
Wow.
There's just this very different post diagnosis and even jealousy if they test negative.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous of people testing positive. That I want to test positive. I want to be through this thing. I'm jealous of people that have had it. Right.
That's the thing that I guess that from the standpoint of where we are right now is, the people that have had significant traumas in their life tend to be a little bit more resilient. They're managing the situation kind of in that day to day because they've done that before. Whereas I think people who have maybe, I'm thinking of Maslow's hierarchy, where you get to the top and you're pretty comfortable in your life and things are really set, and all of a sudden something like this comes in and implodes your world. Those people are having a much harder time psychologically managing how to put the pieces back together, of course.
Is that a general, that sounds like millennials generally, because they've not really, other than having been sort of born around the time of 9/11, they've not really had to struggle with these kinds of crises. Is that accurate, or am I misstating?
No, I think that you're right. I mean, I think that, I think that what I see them is, you think about there's stages in this. So you first get kind of shock, and then you get this denial stage. And the millennials I feel like they're pretty stuck in that denial. And I would say / dismissive stage.
That's
sometimes
not
because
my
I
experience
think
is
that
more
yeah.
the anger stage. That's what I'm seeing, right?
Oh, that they get stuck there
Yeah, I'm seeing a
because
lot,
it's maybe because it's up, yeah,
well, a lot of
affecting their lives.
a lot of
Yeah,
anger and blaming and a lot of it. I mean, and then scapegoating, right? Which is sort of the primitive response to that,
right,
which is you gotta sacrifice to the lava god if there's a volcano erupting because it must be somebody's fault.
right, right. And that's the part that I think that they are dealing with things differently in the sense that, I went out to the store and I saw probably 5 or 6 20-something-year-olds all just laughing around and shopping. And, it wasn't like I'm going to go and get my stuff and come out.
So maybe there's two, they sort of, so they're going
like,
into, they must be going into two camps, the sort of denial, dismissive, and then the angry, kind of self-righteous.
right.
Interesting.
Well, self-righteous and maybe just like they don't think it's going to apply to them. Like even if they get it, they don't really care because the media has told them that they're immune from it, which we all know isn't true.
Right.
I don't know.
What's interesting? Here's something interesting is Susan and I looked at each other one day and we thought, our parents were Depression, World War II era, and they beat into us, sometimes literally, the the idea that catastrophe is around every corner. You got to bury gold coins in the backyard. You never know. Tomorrow's the end of times. Tomorrow could all collapse. And we were sort of strangely reared for this.
You're going to put me in the poorhouse.
Yeah, my dad was always going to the poorhouse every day. But we were we were put on constant alert, and now it's happened and we're like, all right. You know what I mean? It didn't shock us the way it shocked.
My dad didn't have any money.
But he was in World War II,
yes,
right?
He was.
And he was, he thought he was going to die in a Navy ship, and he wasn't. And he knows how you can be. He knew how you could be displaced, how things can go in an instant. And we were reared with that.
Right.
And we thought it was a horrible thing when we were growing up.
We ran a recession-proof business as a hardware store owner.
Right, but it certainly it served us in this.
Now? I don't know.
I think some of them are. Yeah.
He would have been.
Oh, he would not have done. Are you kidding? He wouldn't listen to anybody.
Well, I mean, I think there was a story that came out, and I talked to a friend of mine who's a firefighter here. He's actually a captain, but there's a story that came out of New York that there were some kids that came up and they were taunting the first responders, and one of the kids sneezed on him, and then of course he came positive with COVID, the firefighter, whether or not the teenager gave it to him or not.
Oh my
God. But again, it goes back to the different mentality and the psychology of how people are managing their stress and whether or not they're, how they feel about the situation, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It's just really hard. You can't, that's what at least my dad's generation, my dad's 85, it's like walk in someone else's shoes and then come back to me.
Right.
So we're all in this struggle. And I think that, as a psychologist, obviously I'm talking to various people. As a physician, you're talking to people. As a physician, as a media person, you're talking to people. And I think that it's really important to remember to the listeners that we all have roles that we play. Some of us play multiple roles. So if I'm working and I put as an attorney, I'm like advising some of my business consultants on, whether or not financially their recovery on their business after COVID, that's a different hat than my psychology hat. And I think that if people can have a little more compassion to their grocery store clerks, to their teachers, to everyone out there that has to wear multiple hats, and just have a little bit of appreciation that we're all trying to do our best, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Compassion, empathy, we sort of, we collectively engaged in this lockdown and quarantine as a function of, as a expression of goodwill to one another, right? Not only are we staying safe, but I'm not going to affect anybody else. And I feel like we need to have that kind of goodwill as we move forward, as we roll this thing out, because it's going to be choppy. It's going to be choppy.
Right.
Susan, somebody's asking,
right.
Somebody's asking your feelings about me going to the front lines.
I didn't know we were going to talk about that today.
Well, you can just do a second on it.
Well, first I said you need to call him back and you did. And then I felt nervous because Paulina made me feel nervous, about it because she's in New York and it scares her. But I honestly feel that if you're capable, you should do what you need to do to help society. And I'm 100% behind you.
Good.
I'll bring the camera, and we can still do Dose of Dr. Drew from New York because we've done that before. I'll make sure there's food in the fridge and that we clean your clothes off and wipe you down at the door. And then if I get it, I get it. I mean, I want to get it, for Christ's sakes.
See, this is Susan and I have a little bit of envy of people that have had it.
I'm from German descent. This is
I know there's a ventilator in my future, but whatever. So.
You'll be fine. You're on that high protein diet. You'll be fine. You have to get in first, and I mean, it's good that you offered up, but
it was interesting, Lisa. I don't know if your husband, Lisa's husband's a physician also, but they were interviewing me about my experience and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I've done that, I've done lots of that, and I guess internists aren't doing intensive care work anymore, and I've done literally decades of it, and so my skill set, although rusty, experientially is particularly suited to what they needed. So that was why I was like, well, I got to go.
Right.
So
it's kind of weird going to New York. Though.
Yeah.
But I love it there.
Well,
take my hydrolyte, Jane says.
Yeah.
I agree with that. We will bring lots of it, I assure you. All right. So I interrupted you, Lisa. I'm sorry. I will interrupt you occasionally based on what's going on the stream here. People ask lots of questions and they kind of come up on the stream. But go ahead. We were talking about the various ways. Yeah, we were talking about the ways in which we're all reacting to this thing, and you'd mentioned about. I think I heard you say, and I want to dig into this a bit deeper, that trauma survivors somehow have a better. If you've been through trauma, it's easier to dissociate from all this or to disconnect from it. And what are trauma survivors doing?
So trauma survivors have learned in the past that you have to take things moment by moment, sometimes day by day. And you get into this mentality, that basal ganglia area of the brain, right? Like that you're kind of hyper alert and you're kind of always waiting for the shoe to drop. So the shock of a situation like this isn't quite as intense for people who have kind of lived in that world and have learned how to manage anxiety, manage the stress a little bit differently.
Dissociation.
Will it increase it for them?
Dissociation. That's part of the primary strategy.
Right.
But they also go into survival mode.
Right.
They know how to dissociate from their emotions and then take care of business sometimes, right? So it's not really resiliency so much as
survival.
Survival, yeah. And that's what dissociation is. It's a survival technique. I think I have a little bit of that, and I think I've got a whiff of it. I keep on trying to figure out why I'm not reacting to certain things, and it's because I don't feel them fully. It's just too much. I can't process stuff.
Well, again, I think that you have a very analytical, logical brain that's medically trained also. So I think that you're looking at data, you're looking for, I did a Facebook Live earlier with my husband, and I kept looking at him and I was like, talk in English, like you're talking so much like a doctor. Like where, again, the analysis is so important on it. Whereas most of us need to focus in, if we don't have the medical background, to develop the habit of accurate, honest, disciplined thinking. The person who goes through life of like, this is kind of, again, not generalizing to millennials, but like that don't worry, be happy, kind of that ignorance is bliss kind of mentality. Those people statistically die earlier from accidents and preventable illnesses because they're not informing themselves. So I don't know. I call it the informed optimist. That's how I choose to try to live my life. And I do have that background of trauma and have figured out a way to find the silver lining in almost everything.
Is your husband seeing
share that forward?
Is he taking care of many cases down there?
He's had multiple cases now. Yeah. So our practice is in Scottsdale, and again, like his practice was actually identified by the FDA to do one of the verification sites for the antibody testing. So they're validating the serum test, and so
that's great.
We were one of the first that put through a bunch of tests. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
I've had a lot of people in.
I've now I've now cared for a bunch of cases, and people, it's brutal, but people generally do awfully well. I mean, they in particular the 30-somethings do. It's brutal, but they do fine. The older folk, it's it's treacherous. I mean, you're always waiting for the shoe to fall in that so-called cytokine storm. But my experience so far has been pretty good with the current therapeutics. But is he doing anything interesting with the remdesivir or any of these other medications?
No. So for the most part, again, he's family practice. So he's seeing walking wounded. They're coming in with symptoms.
Right.
They're getting them tested, and then he's managing it before they're going into the hospital.
Right.
So, there's regular doctoring things that are happening. As a patient that just had a brain bleed,
that's actually one of the problem. Actually, one of the bigger problems we're having right now is people are delaying coming in because they're fearful of the coronavirus with routine medical problems that need to come to the hospital. That is a warning for everybody. If you need to go to the hospital, go to the hospital. They're very good now at isolating respiratory illnesses, isolating COVID. You're not likely to get exposed. I mean, don't go if you don't need to go, but if you need to go, go. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that, my sister-in-law works for Big Health, Dignity Health. I think you guys have that in California as well. And I was on with 400, doing mindfulness practices with frontline people. And one of the things that I heard was there's a lot of hospitals that are empty, right? Like they're scaling down their ERs because nobody's showing up.
Right.
And that does make me nervous.
Well, I mean, we're obviously being very careful with how we roll this thing out. I mean, it's not like we're going to allow a giant spike to occur. We're just not going to allow it. And so and by the way, we don't know. Well, here's something we don't know. We don't know that the social distancing we were practicing before the lockdown, we don't know whether or not that might be enough. I mean, think about how much we recoil from one another now, right? We won't go near each other. We wear gloves and masks everywhere. That may be sufficient to really clamp things down a bit. Nope.
Well, again, in terms of the spread of it, I think that it goes back to you listen to what's worked, you look at best practices, and you have to pivot every day. So somebody who has OCD is probably way better equipped to manage this situation versus somebody who doesn't. And yeah.
Yep. I'm looking around at some of the. Go ahead.
One of the things that, I was just going to say, one of the things that I think I can see your comments now. Somebody writing in about generalized anxiety. Yeah, those people that have walked into the situation who have been dealing with levels of mental health challenges, I'll call them. But if you have that, you kind of are ready for these events to happen. And so it's not a huge shift psychologically a lot of times. And there's a lot of people that are having real true anxiety or panic attacks for the first time that have never had them before. So the gamut that I'm seeing kind of runs the entire spectrum in the terms of mental health and how people are just absorbing the information and managing it.
Well, let's talk about the crowd behavior a little bit. We've sort of established that people are into this sort of denial or anger. It's a grief response, right? The world as we knew it does not exist, and we have to grieve the loss of the old world. Essentially, it's sort of at least a way of framing it. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think that there's I was putting together, you and I had chatted on the phone a little bit, and I put together a presentation for another group, and I had talked about the stages of grief. And I added in, from my standpoint, the Kubler-Ross stages of grieving something are important, but in a trauma reaction, you add in that situation, you'll add in solution seeking, and you'll add in the shock. So it goes shock first, that initial paralysis that people are seeing.
Right.
Then you'll go into a denial /dismissing. Then you get into this bargaining. Then you get into anger, anxiety, depression, sadness, solution seeking, and then acceptance. Those are kind of the 7 stages of a trauma reaction that I just threw together because I was like, this is what we're seeing or I'm seeing in my practice.
Interesting. Well, that sort of makes sense. I mean, that's kind of how that works. But let's talk about the mob again. So people, the people are stuck in anger, are looking for a scapegoat or a way to. I mean, what is that? What's going on psychologically? So they're in the shock. They go to grief. They go through denial into sort of anger and bargaining, that kind of thing, and then they get stuck there. What's that all about?
Yeah. You mean that mentality and why they're staying there?
Getting stuck in anger. Why people get stuck in anger, and then why the satisfaction of essentially doing what people did during the French Revolution and not understanding that they're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that goes back to you're struggling with the external locus of control versus internal locus of control. People generally want to have belief that they have control over their life and that the decisions and the actions that they do on a day-to-day basis influence what happens on the other end. And in a situation like this, they're completely outside of that. They're externally, the control is all given up. And so I think that anger and that frustration is that they're being told no. They're being told you have to do this. They're being told you're going to get sick. You could die. Like all of these things, which takes all of the control and all of that.
But I get that.
Confidence out.
I get that completely. But we're all going through that. Why do some people get stuck in anger? They just do.
Well, that generally has to do developmentally, right? Generally, if again, and are they siloed? So, my world of looking at the psychology of technology and how they influence one another, most times you'll see those in cohorts that are stuck together, like they're in, friend groups or they're in social media chat rooms together and things like that. So they seek out that attention, that energy, and that reinvigorates it over and over again. It's like it's groupthink.
Yeah.
And it's influential. And in times like this, you are looking for somebody who can affirm you because you want some control back. You want some reassurance and affirmation. That's why you get stuck there. Is what are you bringing in?
Well, and humans have a way of a developmental history. Humans don't like to look at this, but human sacrifice was a common way of dealing with when a population got stressed. They'd throw people in the volcano. They'd sacrifice the prettiest virgin, whatever it was. I mean, humans do that. And this is still that kind of behavior for those people that get stuck in the anger. Seems like.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, people are people, right? I mean,
right.
we're not perfect, and we tend to, I think, take the path of least resistance, particularly when we have outside stresses.
Let's go back to the lack of control and hopelessness and lack of ability to plan or even see the future. That's the most disturbing part for me, is that if the government keeps talking about reopening, but then doesn't give us a plan, which is what we really need. Like, we want to know that we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this. By the way, speaking of okay, somebody asked about Florida. So I did look up Florida, and they are going to, this University of Washington model is recommending switch to containment on June 1st. So your utilization is going to get meet and your death rate's fairly low, but it's going to drag out throughout the month of May, according to his model. So there is Florida. So what was I just saying? The inability to plan a future and a government.
Lack of control.
Yeah, and the government that goes, hey, here's a framework for getting out. We're going to test and we're going to get you out. It's like, yeah, we all know that's what we need to do to get out of this. What are you going to do? How are you going to do that? And I've been a little disappointed that they haven't given us that. I'm not just disappointed personally. I'd like to know that, but more in terms of getting people's emotional systems recalibrated. They need to be able to see, okay, here's what they're going to do. Here's what we got to achieve. Let's go do it. They're not giving us that right now.
Right. I mean, and I think that it's challenging because you have to look at that this is laid in with a political climate. It's layered in with financial, economic considerations that they're having to look at. And from the psychology of it, and you look at what people just want to know when and how.
When and how. That's right. When and how.
So,
not general strokes about how we are going to do this. We want to know how are we going to do it exactly. And Nyandra just mentioned in the stream that apparently Doctors Fauci and Bricks did give some specifics. I would like to know about that. I didn't see that, but I'm mostly thinking about my state and my city, who have given some very specific frameworks, but no specifics about how they're going to do it. And that's what I was thinking about. I don't know about the federal government. In fact, the federal government's not going to do it. It's going to be your local governments that really do it. Every state is different, just based on this COVID-19 health data stuff I'm reviewing with you. Every state has a different date at which they can convert to containment strategy based on his models. So I interrupted. Go ahead.
Right. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if the answer is that there's no generalizing what the response is. I mean, you look at, Arizona is very different than New York and very
Right.
different than California.
Right.
Like, and I've got people in many different, Chicago, for instance, like the population, like they never close the golf courses here. Right. There's people out hiking and doing things here, and our numbers are, I think, fairly low. You're the one who has the magic chart
Yeah.
that says things.
Yeah.
So to be able to say, like, everybody has to shut down everything at the same time and say that the blanket works, I think that again, if we can have some compassion and understanding that we're doing best practices,
Yeah.
and you have 10 people in the room, you're going to have 10 different opinions on what is going to work best. And those 10 people will come to a consensus that, 20 minutes later, they might like post a tweet and say, well, I never really agreed with that anyway, or something, so it's really, to me, and again, like the psychologist in me is looking at, okay, how do we have an influence on the positive side? How do we reassure people it will end? And when we say end, it means we will get back to our communities, our economy coming back in place. But we're going to have viruses. We're going to have things that impact our world. There's going to be future things that happen that we don't have control over. And right now is a period of time where as a human, we can go in and say, all right, how do we have compassion? How do we support? And how do we focus in on our strengths, which is hopefully reuniting and having, to me, again, I'm the optimist. I'm looking at, maybe this will help culturally pull us together to understand that really globally, we really are no different. Like, we want our loved ones to be okay. We want to be able to help when we can. We want to make sure that our needs are met. So
you would hope.
Course,
I'm seeing a lot of unraveling, I gotta say. But back to Arizona, you're gonna have a total of 267 COVID deaths. How many in your state? Like 20 million? 15 million? Do you know?
In the state of Arizona?
Yeah.
No.
Is that many?
I think that we're like closer to 3 to 4.
Oh, really?
Million.
That's small. Okay. So 267.
Well, I'm saying that's Phoenix. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Let's say 8 million just for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
But you have almost no. What I'm noticing, how many?
7.279 million.
There you go. I'm looking at the hospitalization. All that's going to be very low. You're going to meet your needs easily. But it does make me look at the fact that they are urging Arizona to switch to containment on the first week of June, or after the first week of June, because the death per day graph is going to stretch out across the month of May. I don't understand why they want to wait. This is something I'm going to have to chew on for a while. Why to wait for containment till a delay graph catches up with reality? It seems to me that the containment all should be done 2 weeks earlier than the end of the slope on deaths per day. I don't know. We'll have to chew on that for a while.
What is the containment? What are they?
Containment is, specifically relaxing social distancing, containment strategies including testing, contact tracing, isolation, limit gathering sizes. So it's continuing to do what we do other than stay home. And they're sort of waiting till the deaths per day go to 0 before they recommend transitioning to containment. And that I don't understand, because your bed utilization is already at 0. Well, it will be at 0 in essentially 0 on May 7th, May 9th. Well, a couple of, well, 9 people on May 22nd. So it just doesn't make sense to wait until all these lags go to 0. But I don't know. I don't know whether, hopefully someone can explain that to me. I'm going to speak to an epidemiologist. Is that tomorrow, Susan? Yeah. Tomorrow, okay.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, you have, she's at 2 p.m. and then we also have the other person at 10 a.m.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little epidemiology tomorrow, really get into these graphs and see what I'm missing, because I'm not an epidemiologist.
So we'll have 2 shows tomorrow. One at 10 a.m. Pacific time and one at 3 p.m. I think.
Oh,
Pacific time.
That's weird. So we're going to do two appearances separated by 6 hours.
All your
hours.
experts were on the same day, and I couldn't help it. What could I do?
All right. Fair enough. So
you're doing a great job, Susan.
Yes, she is. Lisa, let's talk about when people should, and how do you in a time like this get help? When should you get help? Because usually it's kind of an interesting phenomenon. Usually we talk about function as the line that you can easily point at as someone needing psychiatric psychological care. You have difficulty functioning interpersonally, work, school, that kind of thing. But all that is on hold. So how do you tell and everybody's having psychiatric symptoms. How do you tell when you should be getting help? And then how do you do it at a time like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you really, this is where I feel I stress to people, if you don't have like family, friends, but like experts that you feel comfortable having conversations with, if, I think that all the insurance companies allowed for teletherapies, sessions with doctors. So I think that if you're starting to have events that are making you feel like you're not feeling yourself in a way that is changing how you're functioning, I think that you call in, and that's when those symptoms that most concern me would be, changes in appetite. You can't concentrate. You're not sleeping anymore, so now your mood is going off. If your outbursts, you're starting to create risky behaviors for yourself because, again, you're starting to lose a grasp on like when this is going to end. That's what I saw on Monday when they released that they were going to have an additional 2 weeks of extending social distancing and shutting things down. I had a rash of calls after that. So, just little microscopic changes like that really can impact us. And obviously the medical stuff you can speak to that people might be feeling. But I think the emotional side, from my standpoint as a psychologist, those impact our stress, our health as just as much, I think, as we can imagine when you're going through something like this. Particularly if you're alone. Most of us have, like a lot of us have people with us. I've got 3 clients that are 2 in apartments and 1 in a home that have nobody with them, no animals. That's a little bit disconcerting for them because they're very ostracized. So, just reaching out when you need help and you start having thoughts that take you into dark places and the shadows become bigger than the sun. That's what I say.
Right.
That's when you should call.
And so what about digital safety right now? People are home with their phones and computers, and what are you seeing? Any uptick in any patterns?
Oh, it's a mess. Yeah. You have 72 million kids that just hit, in the United States alone, that just hit the airwaves, for 3 to 6 hours a day. So if you think about all those kids that went into
it seems like a lot of them have moved over to TikTok. Is that creating something new that we had unanticipated? Let me look at my TikTok right now.
Oh, yeah.
See what's going on there. What's going on TikTok?
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Saying nasty things to us.
I go on it once in a while, and all I seem to get, I'm immediately getting a picture of an airplane that's empty. I'm getting, just nonsensical stuff. People dancing around, people doing parkour stuff. That's not all I get. What is on there that's problematic?
So right now, one of the things I'm trying to see if I sent a picture earlier to Susan. I don't know if we can put them up, but the TikTok has, there's a bunch of cappers, which are, we call, law enforcement, we call people who go in and capture videos and images. So there's been a trend where they're actually going in and soliciting dances that focus on the feet for the fetish folks. So there's a huge amount of not just predators now, but I think that the sex addiction fetish people, like, they're starting to get bored. They don't have to, if they're not going to work, they're going onto these platforms and they're finding really young, naive kids that are willing to put things on there. So the number of cases that the ICAC unit, the Internet Crimes Against Children units, are facing right now is massive.
Well, talk to us about that unit. Talk to us
yeah.
about that unit for a second. Where's that? The FBI?
No. So Internet Crimes Against Children are units across the United States that are within the police stations in every city that you have. So there's a specific team of individuals. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's many, but they focus on digital crimes, online crimes that are happening. So trafficking, pornography, luring, all of those things that you can think of, or hopefully don't always have to think of, is the world that I live in. And so those briefings that I have locally and sometimes in other cities, that ICAC is all geographically within your state. So if you have a problem with it, or if you're not paying attention to what your kids are doing online, I would say you should start,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of traffic going on to all of those sites.
It's crazy.
So glad I don't
That-
have
that
younger
wasn't
kids.
there before.
Can
Ugh.
you imagine?
Poor Lisa has a,
Oh my gosh, you have
what do
no
you have?
idea.
You have a third grader and a seventh grader, right?
Fifth grader,
Oh.
fifth grader and seventh grader. Yeah.
So
I just sent you the picture of all the most trending apps, Susan. I don't know if you can post that for anybody, but TikTok, Instagram, YouTube are the top 3. Snapchat, then WhatsApp is the next one. The picture I sent her has the icons for people. Likey is a new one that looks like a little bit like the Southwest Heart, but it's rainbow, and that's a video app that kids are starting to move over to because it's not monitored by most parent monitoring apps. YOLO, which is you only live once, which is, the kids are jumping on there because you can send messages to people totally anonymous and say whatever you want. And then House Party, of course, is now they went out and started advertising to kids that this is a perfect COVID
hold on, I'll get the
platform for
pictures
you.
up in a
You
minute.
can come join on
I'm emailing it to myself.
with 8 of your friends.
Wow. That is crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're opportunistic, right? So, and people need to be social. So the balance is like, how do we get social? How do we jump on and have conversations with people? And how do we keep our kids safe from making silly mistakes and putting things up there?
So I want to go back to the 7 emotional stages in trauma. So shock, the initial paralysis, you said, denial, dismissal, which a lot of people were sort of stuck in. Bargaining, I didn't see a lot of bargaining. Did you?
Well, in the sense that I can just go to the store for a minute, or I can do this, and if I do that, like that part of the bargaining where they're like, I still need to do my things. So they kind of justify it. Like, I guess the bargaining would be more risk tolerance or risk decisions,
Right.
is where the bargaining would come in this situation.
The anger, anxiety, seems to me most people are still there. Depression and sadness kind of drifts in and out. I think the anxiety and anger might be sort of I don't want to say a defense, but we'd rather be in that than depression or true helplessness, right?
Right.
And then solution seeking and acceptance. Again, as I told you, when I signed up for, to go be of service in New York City, immediately my mood improved. Immediately, I was like, I've got something to offer, and they need me. I'm on my way, and that was very interesting to me. I think we have to all kind of think about.
Okay, I got the two things up, and they're both on the same. Just you're talking about the 7 emotional stages and trauma reactions, right?
Right.
Okay, that's on the right, on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the competition. She sent me a picture of all the different
platforms, the
platforms,
crazy platforms
that are dangerous. So
yes, those are the ones that all the kids are bouncing in on, and that we're seeing an influx of people. There it is. Well, what's your competition as a parent?
What are you up
That's
against?
what the slide was for. This is where your kids are going. Yeah.
House Party. I've
They're
never heard
jumping
of
into that world.
What's the heart with the rainbow? What's that?
That
platform?
is Likey. So it's a little bit like TikTok. It's video, it's social, it's sharing. It is not one that's on the parents' radars.
Is it an app?
Go there.
Is it an app?
It's an app. Oh yeah, it's an app.
I can imagine what yellow is.
There's apps coming out every single day.
And so, as one of your things one of your things at Digital Citizen Academy is how can you sort of supervise what kids are doing if you don't even know?
Right, and so the part is like it was interesting being in front of all those schools and districts today. I said I am invariably only on one occasion have I ever been brought in to a situation where it is, I want to be prepared because I know that this is something I should be thinking about. So they're buying the fire extinguisher first. It is always the house burned down. We have 80% of our population has now been read their juvenile Miranda rights because of something that went on the campus. Can you come in and solve this for us? And it's like
80%. Wait, whoa. Paint that. Describe what you mean by that. What happened?
Break that down.
Yes. Yes.
So what typically happens in a school setting is, let's take, for instance, just like a kid sends a naked picture to another kid. So as you can imagine, you're 12, 13, 14, that's a pretty exciting day. So we're going to send that to 5 of our best friends.
Mm-hmm.
So they send it to 5 of their best friends. And then literally, I would say in all of my cases, within 48 hours, at least 85% of the student population has seen the picture.
And therefore they're all guilty. And they're all guilty. And therefore they're all guilty of child trafficking, child pornography, and all get read their Miranda rights.
Well, so in one of the schools that I went into, the SRO, the student resource officer, was identified. They came in and they did, of course, these digital footprints. I think that kids are given the devices and not told necessarily how they work, but of course you can trace everything. So if you take a picture of yourself naked and never do anything with it, you're fine. If you send it to someone, then that's a charge of distribution of child pornography. If you receive it and you delete it immediately, there's no charge. But if you hold on to it, now you have possession of child pornography. And if you resend it, now you have two, possession of child pornography and distribution of child pornography. So you can imagine as you start to unwind all of that, for instance, in California, that is a felony charge. So even if it's minor to minor sending naked pictures, that's a felony. You could be on the sex registry for life.
And so what happens? You said 80% of the school had been exposed, so 80% of the school are felons. What do you do when you go into that?
Well, again, are they prosecuted, right? And what we had a case here where a senior pulled down his pants in the senior photo. They sent off that picture. You can imagine there's 400 kids in the picture. They sent off the picture to the printing press. The yearbooks were printed, and then they were distributed. So the kid was getting faced with, I think it was 1,100 charges of exposure of child pornography or something, because the population of the school.
Oh my
But
God.
then the attorney general here had to make a decision on, okay, well, what was our responsibility as an educational system to proof the picture? Is the publisher responsible for it? And it ultimately went away with, I think, a minor, like a misdemeanor and some social stuff. So again, it goes back to the laws haven't caught up to all the things that our kids are doing. The industry, the technology industry itself, it certainly has. They're keeping pace right along with the kids. So they're creating apps on a daily basis to keep their attention.
Wow. And then the parents have to say, and you're saying the fire extinguisher. Well, what was your metaphor about the fire extinguisher?
I would really prefer if school districts and families and people called me when they were, oh, I bought a house or I bought a school. Like, I have a school, I should buy a fire extinguisher for it.
Right.
That would be an ideal setting, but I'm always called and the smoke is smoldering and the ashes are on the ground.
Crazy. It's so oof. And again, back to the current circumstance. So people are, they're going to school on their computer. Do we think that has made things even worse?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it has, because what happens is some teachers are giving kids 20 minutes of work a day, but as a parent, you're giving them access to the technology and then you're focusing on your own stuff. They could get their work done in 20 minutes and have 4 hours that they're just jumping around and playing with apps and doing things that they shouldn't be doing online. And as a parent, again, you can't sit over their shoulders.
Yeah.
Whether you have one or you have three, right? You just can't. So that goes back to you have to empower kids to understand and teach them before they're introduced to these things.
Let me read you a comment from our Facebook stream, which Arizona has separate juvenile code for this situation, starts as a petty offense and can move to misdemeanor felony based on other circumstance. Is that because of that case?
No, it's because of a case. It wasn't because of that case. So we have a minor, they call it loosely a Romeo-Juliet exception. So if you have two kids under the age of 18 exchanging things, it becomes a misdemeanor, and it's managed a lot differently. But some states have not caught up, and that's the challenge that I see. And we don't work as a nation on this. So if I have a kiddo in Arizona and they send a picture to a kid in California, that then becomes a felony for that kid. And not to terrify the people that are listening right now, but as a parent, that device, that ISP, internet service provider that you signed the agreement to and the contract to, that is your responsibility and your liability. So if your kid does something that legally gets them in trouble, so it could get themselves in trouble if they send a naked picture of themselves. But that doesn't change the fact that you're now open as a parent and as a family to a civil lawsuit on the social emotional impact that trauma has caused whomever was involved in it.
Wow.
That's the terrifying part.
Let's switch gears.
And that's, right now the technology, I was just going to say that the COVID thing right now with technology is all of the people that are talking about conspiracies and who started it and how it's getting spread. So I'm sure that you've heard about that, but that is fundamentally being fueled through these social media platforms.
Let's do the remaining minutes. Let's talk a little bit about domestic violence and substance abuse. Big issues in all this too. I'm hearing a lot. I'm hearing a lot about domestic violence.
Did you read Nancy Baker's comment on Facebook?
What did she say?
She said, I belong to a karaoke group on Facebook that just last night a lady was reported doing a live singing video while domestic violence was going on.
She had and was beating up
her husband. Another guy, different video message, kids asking for exposure photos. He was also reported. So, you know, free time.
Well, well, it's even, I think, a little more subtle than overt episodes of increasing domestic violence, which I'm sure is happening. But it's women particularly that are locked into the cult of one with a domestic abuser. This is a circumstance where they're really locked in and don't feel that they can even contemplate getting out, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you think about, again, like people are talking, it's like, oh, take the time, clean your closet, do these things. Well, if you live with an abusive person, whether it's psychological abuse or physical abuse, and now you're stuck within the parameters and that person who is the abuser is able to control and manipulate you even further and you have no reason to leave the house, there are extremely high rates of domestic violence and child abuse actually that are being reported on a daily basis, so much so that I know here in Arizona that they're overwhelmed with the calls.
And I think
from a state-by-state basis, I can't imagine that's different.
And everyone knows that alcohol is fueling a lot of this stuff for sure, and alcohol is up, and we've left open our weed dispensaries and our liquor stores for everybody to have at it, which I don't know how you could possibly close them. The people would truly go, have an uprising then, but just interesting. And
it almost seems like people are using it as a free pass, right? So, you can't go into work if you're not an essential worker. And so why not just sit home and have a party and get, if you have issues with it, it's not anything different for you, but now you don't have that 8 hours of demand to stop you from doing it. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting recovery on the other side, at least in my mental health world, for sure.
Someone said
pulling us back to the center.
Someone said New Mexico has closed their alcohol distribution, so that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about paranoia and conspiracy theories, which always go up at times like this. Do you want to explain to people what the psychological sort of backbone of that is?
Well, a lot of times from a psychology standpoint, you're trying to find the answers. We want to answer and logically figure out and put the puzzle together on how we got here, because it makes a difference to people if we're here because of an accident or we're here because somebody was trying to create harm to us. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing of like if a kid comes into the hospital and they're hurt, did they fall on their bike or did the dad hurt them or the mom hurt them? Like that, there's a difference in how we respond to that as humans. So I think that the psychology behind it is people are just trying to figure out an answer for themselves, again, to pull back that level of control and to understand and make sense of a situation that quite frankly, nobody's ever been in before.
Right.
So that's why I think that the conspiracies
it's sort of a manifestation of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is your emotional systems are reacting, your cognitive systems are trying to make sense, and you can only make sense based on your cognitive experience. And people don't have much of any experience with something like this, if any at all. And so it starts filling in with explanations that sort of sound right or fit with the emotional state you're in, and they're often way off.
Yeah. Well, and it's really interesting. I have people who are talking to me about aliens now, and it's almost like, again, in my world, I give permission for people to talk freely and share their thoughts and their feelings. And so when people are trying to make sense of things, I'm always kind of pulling in, like, well, what is the reality testing points to that? Like, what are the data? Like, what's the information you have? But I have a lot of people that are really going outside of this, and those people are, again, those people are kind of coming unhinged a bit.
Right.
And trying to really figure out whether or not we have absolutely no control or we have some control.
The problem is in those unhinged thoughts, and again, it's what we call stinking thinking. Thinking can be completely distorted by mental health issues. They find echo chambers in the internet, and that has its own reality then, which is the sad part here.
Right. Well, we had somebody that here in Arizona, it's a open carry state where you can, as long as you have a gun on the outside of your clothes, it is fine. And in one of the Safeways in town here, somebody walked in, saw somebody who had a gun on his hip, grabbed it off of the guy's hip, and started shooting in the air. Didn't hit anybody or shoot anyone. But of course, the guy has gloves on. There's no fingerprints, and he has his face entirely covered because we're all wearing masks, and then ran away.
Oh my gosh.
And so you think about, so again, like, this isn't somebody with malintent to hurt someone, but they're clearly not, my response to law enforcement was, like, you still need to find this person for, not just for the incident, but like this person is unhinged. You don't grab somebody's gun and just shoot it in the Safeways, or a grocery store. So yeah, I mean, I think that paying attention to those people around us, it's very interesting. Like, just have compassion, be kind, do extra gestures to others. I saw somebody make a comment that they weren't sure that we were going to have more understanding and compassion and unity. But I do think that if we work together to share that out of ourselves, that it can become contagious. And I think that we can kind of spread that goodwill.
Lauren Peterson says appropriately, it's the William Hung effect we were talking about. And the William Hung effect is the Dunning-Kruger phenomenon. So you're onto it. The William Hung suffered from Dunning-Kruger, so to speak. All right, Lisa. Well, thank you so much. Very interesting. And, as of last night, you said we weren't talking enough about mental health. So here we are now discussing it. And we've got,
wow,
there's a lot more to do, of course, as this goes on, because it'll be interesting to see what the sort of psychiatric patterns are once we come on through this. Is it going to be despair and depression? What are we going to see? Substance? Hard to predict, but we're going to see something, that's for sure. So listen, it's Dr. Lisa Strohman, Strohman. We'll put some stuff up on the website. Digital Citizens Academy, dcakids.org is where you can find out more about all the digital safety issues. And do you want to refer people to your practice? Nah, busy enough.
Sure. No, if they have, I mean, if they need help or they can go to my website. I'm happy. Like, I can see twice as many people now because I'm sitting in my home. I don't have to travel anywhere.
Right.
And so,
right.
People need help. I'm here to help. This is what I do.
Fair enough. All right, Lisa, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right. Stay healthy.
Thank you. You too. Stay well. Bye-bye. And let me
All right. Thank
see
you.
And let me wrap up with our restream and stuff here. 1 second.
It's nice having a attorney/doctor, psychologist.
Right. She has an interesting perspective because she can talk about the legal ramifications of some of these behavioral issues. And
the whole FBI thing is just
right. She was a fellow with the FBI, and she was an attorney, and she was a prosecutor. She was a DA.
She's an overachiever.
What? How dare you?
She also helped me when my dad died, and her aunt came and helped me close the hardware store.
Oh, that's right. Her aunt. She was so lovely.
I know.
Helping us.
Because she lived nearby.
That's cool. All right. So I'm looking at all your guys' restream comments here. We appreciate it. And we thank Lisa Strohman for joining us. I'm going to go back on the covid19.healthdata.org, or the other good source of information is COVID Tracking Project, or covidtracking.com. Just click on get data. I will just say we've slowed down in terms of detecting positivity, right? We're on 666,000 cases. We were at 500 at the end of 500,000 at the end of last week. So we've kind of slowed up a bit. And as I said, ICU use is down. We don't see death rates going down yet, but I think that is a lag piece of data that may be 2 weeks behind before we really start to see that.
So Florida says that they're going to keep it closed longer. Is that probably because they have a higher average of elderly there?
Florida is going to keep it closed longer. Well, that was the state I was commenting on. First of all, their hospital utilization is going to really drop down in the second week of May, and their deaths per day is what's kind of different there. That is tracking out most of the month of June. Looking at this data, it looks like they could start to do the containment strategies in the middle of May, but the recommendation.
Then they have to worry about all the snowbirds and people coming in and.
Yeah, and the recommendation is June 1st. And we need to talk. I'm going to try to get a hold of Dr. Murray probably next week and sort of try to understand what are they basing these recommendations? Is it just become too unmanageable if you go too soon and you have so many outbreaks you can't keep track of them?
Florida opened most of their beaches today.
That's interesting.
I mean, I don't see why we can't go on the beach. I guess all the kids out of school would just go crazy, but
it's 15 days since their projected peak. I don't know. I don't quite understand what's going on there. It all looks delayed to me, though. And again, we should see improvements.
Sorry, Lisa's still on the screen. I had to switch it. Thank you, Debbie.
Should have improvements in the deaths per day soon. It just seems like that's a delayed piece of data. Okay.
And New York. Did you talk about New York today?
I looked at New York. I don't know if I talked about it. New York, New Jersey are still really big numbers and struggling. New York, where are we? They're 2 days since their peak resource. They seem to be meeting their demands, certainly meeting demands for ICU and ventilators. The total deaths are projected to be 21,000. I don't know if that's been modified at all since this data started coming in. And again, it's a huge outbreak in New York. And so the lockdown there, again, just see what's interesting about New York is for this same model, they're recommending that containment kick in on June 1st, which seems about right for the outbreak that was going on in New York and the fact that New Jersey, right next door, is struggling with very, very similar kinds of numbers.
So, Drew.
And a more prolonged utilization of hospital resources. Yes.
Rich Barrios wants to know if you have any good news.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, generally the good news is that
people dying is not great.
No, the curves did not change very much with the new assessments. And I think the reason is that although we're having really pretty good effect therapeutically, you can remember the vast majority of people do fine with this infection, and the hospitalization rate is, we've met the demands that our concern was we were going to not be able to meet the demands of ICU, ventilators, and hospitals, and we have done that everywhere, and we've done it rather handily. We still need healthcare workers, apparently, in New York, New Jersey, which is why I've offered myself up there. Doesn't seem like we're going to need, the health corps in California, but we might. So, we're getting through. The testing, LA County is doing a marvelous job with testing right now, at least viral testing. And we need some more guidance on the antibody testing. Which test is the one we should be using? There is concern about excessive false negatives, meaning that you can get a negative result and still be immune to the virus or having been exposed to it. And we're going to talk a little more tomorrow about that epidemiology. As I said, there's a new study out of Stanford that shows, I'll read it again. This is a first large-scale community study in Santa Clara County, found that around 2 to 4% of those tested were positive for antibodies. They tested 3,300 people. That means in the county of 2 million, between 48,000 and 80,000 are already exposed and antibody positive. That is between 50 to 80 times more infections that we were expecting. So that means this virus has been in California a lot for a long time. And if that bears out in other counties, the death rate from this virus should go down considerably, particularly in the state of California. I don't know how much it will have an impact on the country at large. And,
Somebody said Rogan's testing all his guests with the antibody test. Might be a good time to go on the show.
Right, just to get this antibody test.
Do the antibody tests work?
There's concern about excessive false negatives. That's why the FDA hasn't come up with their specific one they want to do yet. And as Lisa just told us, her husband is doing is a research center, so they're doing blood draws, measuring antibodies, which is the definitive way to do it, and blood finger sticks, and getting the rapid test done and see how they correlate.
Oh,
so
I want to know that. If they get one that works, let's get it tested.
Of course. I mean, I could theoretically draw your blood and send it in, and we could just do that.
That's true.
That might be something we could do, because if you and I both,
I think I'd have my doctor do it.
Okay, that's fine with me.
But you are great at drawing blood, I have to say.
Thank you.
You're the best.
Could this be a second wave? Could this be the second wave? That's a really interesting question, Kristen. I don't think so. I think it's all part of a general sloping up, right? We were the first parabola and then down the other side. But anyway, interesting.
Thank you for all the nice questions today.
Yeah, good question.
We only had to swipe a couple of them
out. Good. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you guys are here.
I gave this one guy a chance, but he just kept going and going.
Stacy wants to know where we draw the line regarding civil rights and freedoms. That's what the big discussion is about now, it seems to me. And that's why when I was interested in looking at these containment strategies and worrying that if we only implement that in June, people are going to be really freaking out across the month of May, I think. I've already noticed here locally in Los Angeles, as of Wednesday, it seems like people have been engaging in sort of civil disobedience. They're at the parks, they're at the beaches, they're all over the place, they're on the roads, and that's a change. So they need to...
Not in California. The roads are empty.
No. They were full yesterday compared to how they've been.
Well,
and they're not trafficky, but they're full. And so we'll see. That's
the only upside of this whole thing.
Yeah, there's no traffic and no pollution, and gas prices are down and that kind of thing. We'll see, everybody. We're going to get through this together.
Problems too.
But I'm worried about the duration. I'm worried that I think we can pretty easily get people to May 1st, but getting people past the middle of May, I just see people getting very restless. Is not a strong enough word. So we'll see where it goes, and we'll see. Again, let's look to our leaders. They've been, particularly in California, they've been really great so far. They're giving us frameworks of what they want to do. They want to change the physical distancing in schools and restaurants. They want to give us testing and containment. And those are the two things that they need to be explicit about. How are you going to do that? Is there going to be electronic monitoring? Does Apple and Google have some sort of procedure they're going to include us in? What is it you intend to do? How are we going to test? What things are we going to use to test? One of the reasons I'm excited about what's going on in LA County is they've got a great website there. If you just go to COVID-19 testing for LA County, you can get an appointment immediately, drive through. Everybody's allowed to go through, even with suspicious symptoms. So we are finally doing widespread testing here in LA County. And that is great news. If we could start to do that everywhere and then start to incorporate antibody testing into this and then some sort of monitoring system, well, then we got it. Then we're good. And we can implement containment strategies at that point. So that's very good news.
Love you too, Jules.
And we're getting to that point. Joolz, Jules. And we're getting, we can see the road out. That's the good news, is that even last week, I'm not sure the fog of war was sort of lifting. Now we're in it, but we're not really in the fog of war. We're sort of starting to see the way out. Blood pressure meds increase COVID. No critical tweaker. They do not. The consensus is they do not. They may upregulate the ACE2 binding site for the virus, but they also prevent the virus from entering the cells at that site. So it's a double-edged sword. The guidance from all the professional societies is people on the blood pressure medicines, meaning the ACE inhibitors and the ARBs, stay on those medications. So, okay, let's kind of wrap it up, and we will...
We'll be back at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Can you read the person's name and talk about her a little bit?
Which one is in here tomorrow morning?
Stanford.
Seema Yasmin is our guest tomorrow morning, and she is a physician and a journalist and a scholar. And my goodness, she has so many different things she's into. But one of her things is medical myths and why they persist. And so we may talk a little bit about health misinformation and particularly disinformation during epidemics. That's what I'm interested in. Lisa and I were just talking a little bit about some of these conspiracy theories, but she is actually an expert. She's the John S. Knight Fellow in Journalism at Stanford, and her investigating specialty is spread of health misinformation and disinformation during epidemics. And here we are right in the middle of that. So she is the person to discuss that issue. That's at 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Pacific time.
Pacific time. And then at what time? 3?
3
Pacific?
o'clock.
3 Pacific, we have Dr. Anne Minoin, which is a Rimoin, who is a professor of epidemiology at UCLA. And so I want to dig into some of these nuances around, why the containment strategy is kicking in so late when the deaths per day and the total death rates are such lag indicators. Why are we hanging anything on that? Why aren't we hanging more on the number of positive tests coming in, their number of hospitalizations, that sort of thing? So lots of good stuff planned for tomorrow. We will get into that, and we are anxious to have you join us, and we appreciate that you were here today. And Susan, you ready to wrap it up?
Sure thing, baby cakes.
We'll see you tomorrow.